Hey, you're listening to the Intentional Documentary Podcast. So glad to have you. Around here, I'm gushing over the stories behind the pictures that we freaking love of our own lives. You know, the ones we hold as high value and iconic, because this is where photography meets real life. I'm your host, Marie Moss, and I believe that the best way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Through insightful conversations with photographers, I'll explore preserving life with your camera and using what lights you up to grow your brand. Let's get started. Hey there, Marie here. This topic is my jam. I'm pumped to bring this lesson, episode, mini workshop to you because it has been something I personally have been working on for years, but mostly in 2017. So we are going to talk all about finding total clarity in what matters to you. Now, you might be thinking, Marie, I know what matters to me. My spouse, my kids, my home, my health, my friends, my family, etc., etc. And there are many things I know we can all identify really easily. But there are also many things we don't really realize their importance, or we just don't even notice until it's too late. It's ended, and in extreme cases, maybe the person you shared the experience with has passed on. And I hate that feeling of arriving in a certain point of time and thinking back to a memory and thinking, damn, I really missed that. Not in the bittersweet, like, oh, that was a really good memory type of way, but in that I really wish I could go back to that point in time, or I wish I could experience that again, or I wish that when I was experiencing that I was more present and that I was more mindful of how awesome this experience was at the time. And I don't know about you, but I want to live in more of a state of mindfulness. I want to not just live in the thick of it all, living, but to be mindful and intentional with how I'm living so that I make better choices, so that I'm more appreciative and grateful for different things that are happening. And so that when I'm triggered by something that's driving me nuts, I can identify it and I can either overcome it or I can eliminate it from my life entirely. So in this episode, we will talk about why is mindfulness important to begin with. I'll share with you what sparked this whole journey to mindfulness for me and how I've gained clarity for myself so that you can pick and choose some of the things that I've done perhaps for yourself. And then I do have a specific exercise that I want you to try that has been really eye-opening for me. You will want to download the mini mag that accompanies this episode. Just go to fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast, and you can grab that there. Just look for episode Total Clarity in What Matters to You in This Season of Life, and you'll get it. So you might be wondering, why are we talking about mindfulness when we're supposed to be talking about what I value and how to see more of what I value that I might not realize? Well, I'm here to tell you, my friend, it starts with mindfulness. And it's not just important as like the first step to seeing more of what you do value, but I was struggling in the beginning of 2017. I did not feel I wouldn't say I didn't feel good about my life, but I felt like I was trapped, I guess is the best way to put it. I was not very happy. I wouldn't say that I was throwing a pity party for myself every day or anything like that, but I was just like, okay, on paper, my business looks great, but I'm not emotionally feeling the satisfaction and excitement around it that I want to be feeling if I'm working on it so much. I felt a lot of guilt around choosing my business over getting on the floor and playing monster trucks with my son. I'd get really bitter every day at 4 p.m. when my husband would go out for work. He actually has worked nights for several years now, so he leaves at 4 p.m. So the whole evening and night is me with the kids solo, and I just kept finding myself bored out of my mind. I would do things to try to keep them busy and occupied so that I could just do more of my own things. So there was a big disconnection there. And I was very aware of it, felt very guilty over it, and felt like, what is wrong with me? I should want to participate more with my family. Anyway, just like all these things were going on. And on top of it, I had just come out of doing a launch. And launches are great in one hand for business, but on the other hand, they are a lot of work. And all I knew was that I was like, this is not sustainable. I don't want to continue living this way. Something needs to change. I had been paying for a business coach and strategist and different things for years to propel my business forward, but I felt like my spirit was somehow being pushed to the wayside throughout the whole entire thing. So I started doing some soul searching, if you will, as cheesy as that may sound, to feel like, okay, what is going on? Like, where am I at right now? And why don't I feel content? Why don't I feel as abundant as I know that I should? I was living in my dream home. I have this rock solid marriage. I've got two wonderful, healthy, happy kids. Why am I not emotionally feeling all the goodness that's around me? So I started working with Nikki Elledge Brown in January, and she introduced me to Susan Ferraro. And these two women combined have been the backbone to my growth this year. So I have to give them some credit. But where it really all started was to start looking for the things that I value to begin with. And it was like the more that I looked for things that matter to me, the more I was able to see what matters to me. And the more that I was able to see what matters to me, the more I would remember or be mindful in that moment to either make a picture or to jot down a note of some sort or to journal about it or whatever. And once I started to do that and I became more mindful, I have been able to make better choices in my life. I have felt more connected to my family and my life than I probably have in years. I mean, literally, it's turned my life upside down in a good way as I'm getting ready to say goodbye to what I thought was going to be our forever home here in Michigan, to move south to this mysterious adventure that we're about to have in South Carolina. Bringing this back to photography, I feel like I've been on fire the past couple months, especially because I just want to eat up everything right now while we're still here in Michigan so that my legacy box is filled with the best parts, the things that I want to remember. And I hate using the terminology best parts because I've definitely been photographing some of the things that drive me nuts as well so that I can honor the experience later. And I don't know, I feel different, a lot better than how I felt in January. But enough about me. Let's turn the table back to you as I share 7 ways to gain total clarity around what matters to you in this season of life. Now, you don't have to write madly notes all over as you listen. You can push pause and visit fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast and navigate to episode number 4, where you can download the mini mag that accompanies this episode. And inside the mini mag, I'll have all of these activities I'm about to share with you, plus the exercise at the end, as well as a whole bunch of inspiring photos, of course, of things that I've been shooting that matter to me, just so you have some added inspiration. So pause this now if you haven't gone to the website and got that yet. Now, let's go ahead and dive in to the 7 ways to gain total clarity around what matters to you. Number 1 is address the state of your life. In 2016, I read the book, The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. I flew through that book. I loved it. And basically, if you haven't read it, Gretchen created her own happiness project where she divided her life into different categories, and each month she was working on each category. But she built up. She didn't just say work on a category in January and then didn't think about again until the next January. She actually prioritized her categories and tried to just build upon each category with a new category each month throughout the year. So at the end of the book, I wrote out my own list of different categories in my life that were important to me, like kids, relationships, marriage, home, spirit, money, and so on. And I dreamed about what I wanted to see happen in all of these categories, what would be like the best scenario in each thing, but I never did anything with it. It just sort of sat there. And then earlier this year, I met Nikki Elledge Brown. I haven't met her in real life. I hope I do one day, but I met her online, and she is leading this amazing conversation in her community called Naptime Empires. And it's all about running a business while raising little ones. And I ended up joining her Naptime Empires trimester of awesome earlier this year. It was such a great decision because I think I was already there. I was already knowing and becoming more aware of what was going on or not going on in my life, but I needed that accountability and connection with other women to help me just take those steps forward. And what Nikki did was she had us take this list. I think that there's about 12 categories. And again, it's just all these things like body, mind, home, spirit, and so on. You can make up your own list. It's not like the list. It's really just looking at what different things are in your life and making a list and assessing just where you're at now, where you want to be, and what's just one step you can take to move forward. And then each week we focused on each one of those steps. So by doing that, I started to feel progress when I would check off the step that I wanted to take that week. And when I started to feel progress, I started to feel really confident about declaring what I want. Because I don't know about you, but anytime where I have thought about my 5-year plan or my 10-year plan or just different things that I want out of my life, sometimes it seems so far-fetched and so far out there that it almost just seems silly to do. But if you can dial it in to that one next step, it makes everything seem so much more doable, and it makes the bigger things seem really possible. And what I've learned over the past year, I've heard so many comments from my friends that look at my life and they're like, you are really lucky. You've got this awesome marriage and you have this job that you love and blah, blah, blah. And now you're moving. It's so cool that you're you're following your dreams and you're doing what you want. But all I want to say to them is you can have anything you want if you're willing to first pay attention and two, take just one step forward. You don't have to have all of the answers. And how this ties in with finding clarity in what matters is these baby steps here that you're taking. You're starting to live with what matters as your anchor. And the more you live it, the more you start to see it and feel it. And it becomes like your North Star. Number 2 is look to your past and look to your future. When have you felt your best? When have you felt your worst? What do you miss? And what do you wish that maybe you had more of? So a big lesson that I started to gain in 2013 was that I became hyper aware of just how different my childhood was compared to what my life looks like today. And you might be like, okay, well, thanks, Captain Obvious. This obviously, we grow up, our lives change. But the thing is, I look to a lot of my friends and they still have their grandparents around. They're still experiencing holiday dinners, for example. I always go back to these same examples because clearly they are what matters to me. But my grandparents passed away, so that means a lot of the experiences that I shared with them, which were many, and I will talk about these in a future episode, and holiday dinners, there's a lot of things that just don't happen anymore. And it's not about seeing what's present and what's missing or what's changed, but you'll know what matters by how you feel around these things. So start paying attention to those and you'll start to uncover what matters. Number 3, look at what's predictable. So for example, every time I go to my in-laws, when we leave, my mother and father-in-law come out onto their porch and my father-in-law waves goodbye. I actually made a picture of this just this summer because I knew it was going to happen, and I was able to shoot it because I could anticipate it. And if you start paying attention to what's predictable in your interactions with other people, or it could be something as simple as going to a certain festival. Do you go to a festival or a certain place every year, for example, and you know like the series of events that are about to happen? Or it could be a certain time of day. Like, what does your morning look like? What is predictable? What are some of your favorite things to do because you know that they're going to make you happy? Like, I love going to the riverfront with my kids and my husband if he's around, and we get pizza, just cheese, and we sit by the riverfront. Oh, and we get cannolis. Can't forget the cannolis. Nollies, as my son says. And we have pizza and cannolis by the riverfront watching the freight boats go by. And our order's always the same. We sit almost in the same spot. We bring the same picnic blanket. Like, there's so many things just inside that small story that are predictable. It's predictable that my daughter is going to pick off all of the cheese from the pizza. So start paying attention to that stuff. And again, similar to number 2, you're going to start to feel like understand how you feel around these different things that you notice but may have overlooked. And another thing is street signs. I actually have started photographing, because we're moving, the street signs of the area, and not just street signs, but different landmarks and things like that, like the things that I know I'm going to see on my drive to the school, for example. Number 4 is then and now. This is a photo project that I started for myself in 2016, and I have been having so much fun with it. I know you will too. And what it was for me was I can't remember which picture was the first one that made me realize this, but I think it was this picture of my son, and I'll make sure to put these in the mini mag so that you can see what I'm talking about. But my son in 2014 was crawling. He was less than a year old, and he was crawling from his bedroom to his sister's bedroom. And in between the bedrooms, there is a big window. So their blinds were closed, I think, in both bedrooms. So either way, the bedrooms were really dark. So when he got into that patch of light coming in through the window, it was like a spotlight was on him. And I knew it was going to happen. So I laid on the floor, and as soon as he got fully in that patch of light, I just said, "Levi." And he looked back at me, and I have him just looking back at me in this dreamy light, and all the little baby back folds, and they bend, and their back looks like it has all these teeny tiny little rolls, but it's just their skin. That's what it looked like in this picture. And last year, I think in August, so about a year ago, he was running to and from his sister's room, like full force, almost 4-year-old, actually almost 3-year-old boy running. And I just noticed that stark contrast of the change. So I made a picture. I had my camera on me, and I made a picture of him running from bedroom to bedroom, and side by side. It's just so cool because you see the exact same scene, the same light, but then and now. Kind of like how you see that there's a really trendy picture a lot of moms make of their pregnant bellies in a certain scene, and then you see it again and they're holding baby instead of having the baby bump. Well, I just started doing that with just real life stuff. And the more that I did it, the more pictures of the past would come to mind when I'm in certain situations. I have a whole series of being in our car. I have another of set. I think there's 3 pictures in this where Kendall, actually there's 4. I have Kendall, both of my kids have always loved to get the mail. And I have a few pictures of Kendall down at our mailbox. And it's just so cool because she's short and she's just getting taller and taller. So I have a few pictures where she's reaching up because she can't even reach. So she's literally just reaching into the air. And then I have a picture where she's almost like hanging on the mailbox, like the part that you pull down, because she could open it, but she couldn't see inside of the mailbox. And her hair is like several inches longer compared to past pictures. And then the one I have of Levi, where he's trying to get into the mailbox, then he is short and can't totally reach. And in the background, the environment has changed because the neighbors down the road cleared out all of the trees. It was a lot more foresty around the perimeter of some farmland, and they have completely cleared it out. So in the background of Kendall's photos, it's a dark background because of the trees, but in Levi's, it's more of a white background because you get a lot of the sky, even though the rest of the scene is the same. So this has just been a little game that I've had. I will look at pictures that I have made in the past, and I start to see how things have changed today, which is really cool. And so that gives you clarity in what matters because, first of all, you're seeing differently, which is really awesome in and of itself, but you're also getting a surge of emotion around the transcendence and the growth. Like, if you're a parent, I know you know what I mean when you realize that a last has happened, or when a first happens, like the first day of school and your baby's going to school for the first time ever, like you're emotional and you can just feel that change and that growth. I feel those types of feelings through this project around the certain images that really matter to me. So that's another way to gain more clarity. Number 5 is take a little time to write some morning and evening pages. If you're not someone who likes to write, don't roll your eyes. Just try it for 3 days or 5 days at the most and just see how you feel at the end. So I don't actually do this every single day, but I do like to try to get up about a half hour before my kids, pour my coffee, and sit on my couch and just write. Initially, it was really tough. I'm like, this is weird. I don't know what to say. And I would literally write that. I have no idea what to write here. But I will link to an article in the show notes about morning pages. And I don't know about the science behind it all, but they say that if you get up and you write right away, like your thoughts are a little bit different in those first few minutes of your day as opposed to once your brain really fully wakes up. And that's why morning pages become so valuable. But what I do anyway with this, or what I get out of it, is that I start to feel fired up in the morning just by writing. Sometimes I'll just start off with, I wish the weather was going to be sunny today and blah, blah, blah. And it just helps me without having to look at my to-do list first. I just start thinking about my day unfolding and what I'm looking forward to, what I'm not. And honestly, I just walk away from it feeling fired up. And then at the end of the day, I like to take the last half hour of my day to write again, but it's a different type of a context at this time. Usually in the evening, I'm feeling slightly more emotional, so I get to reflect a little more. I have the ability to have some closure around different things that happened in the day, what worked, what didn't, kind of a thing, and maybe even some direction on what I should do next. And how this helps you get clarity around what matters is that I swear the more that you do this writing, what matters starts to seep through what's top of mind of what you have to get done. And once it starts to surface, you can then really listen to your thoughts, and it's pure gold. Number 6 is stay connected to gain perspective. There's this old adage that I refer back to a lot that is, you cannot read the label on a bottle from inside the bottle. So I love going out with my friends and having conversations. I always leave energized and feeling a bit lighter. So I'm challenging you, if you feel like you're stuck just in this one perspective, just go out, have fun with a friend. Maybe you don't even need to go out, but just join something that allows you to connect with other people, like Nikki's Naptime Empire Trimester of Awesome, or I have the Preservation Project, which is all about photographing things that matter to you and writing a lot of what we're talking about here in this episode. or just pick up the phone and phone a friend. So how you get clarity in what matters by staying connected is that through the stories shared in your time together, or shifting your energy just from breaking your routine. If you're home most of every day, all day, every day, and then you go out for lunch one Thursday with a friend, you're breaking up your routine. And I swear it's like hitting the reset button, and your perspective just is able to get a nice little reset. But also, if you pay attention to the stories that you share when you're connecting, the stories that you share, the stories that they share, you can gain some really cool perspective. And some of those stories will stick with you. And if you have a story that's sticking with you, whether something they shared or you shared yourself, it's a sign that it's something that matters to you. And number 7, think of each special person in your life. Like, make a list of all the special people, and then for each person, what do you see when they come to mind? Write that out for each person. So you've probably heard me say this story before, because I go back to this one time and time again. But when I think of my mom, I think of her in her denim jean jacket with Mickey Mouse on the back and a bottle of Mountain Dew, Diet Mountain Dew in hand. I think of the gummy bears that she always had in the car when we would go on our road trips. There are all these little details that just come to mind when I think about her. And if you could do that for each person, you start to get clarity around what matters, because you're seeing them, how they matter to you and how you have interacted with them. And I think that you will just find it to be a really cool thing. And you'll have, I can guarantee, a whole bunch of ideas for pictures you can watch for when you're out and about with these people. Because you get a mix of predictability in there, and then just certain mannerisms and characteristics about them that you're probably going to want to remember. There you have all 7 ways to gain total clarity around what matters. Let's go ahead and recap real quick, just in case you don't have the mini mag in front of you. Number 1, address the state of your life. Number 2, look to your past and your future. Number 3, what's predictable. Number 4, then and now. Number 5, morning and evening pages. Number 6, stay connected and gain perspective. And number 7, write down what you've seen in your mind for each special person in your life. Now I have one final exercise I want to leave you with, and I didn't include this in the initial 7 ways, only because I want to go a little bit deeper into this one, because it's probably going to be hypothetical for a lot of you, so I want you to really understand its value. A little over a month ago, I went to North and South Carolina with my family on a job hunt for my husband, Dave. We had made the conscious decision earlier this year that we wanted to try to move south. So I think it was the beginning of April, we started applying for jobs online through Indeed.com, and we weren't getting anywhere. I should say, not really we, because I wasn't applying, but he would get these calls from staffing agencies that would say things like, yeah, you sound awesome. I think we have a client that you would be perfect for. And they would tell us about these jobs and their awesome hours and all these really great things that would get our hopes up. And then we'd hear nothing. He'd follow up and would hear nothing, or they would say our client filled the position, or nothing, really. We really got nowhere. It felt like a big dead end. So in the middle of May, I said to Dave, you know what? We just need to go down there, just like we did 5 years ago. You see, 5 years ago, Dave had just moved here from Canada. And when he started to look for a job here locally, we didn't apply online. We printed off a whole bunch of resumes, and I went with him as his navigator, and Kendall was in the back seat. And I kid you not, we went to about 30 different places over the course of 2 or 3 days and dropped off a resume, whether they were hiring or not. And he had a job within 72 hours. It was pretty crazy. So I said to him in May, we just need to do the same thing. And if it works out, great. And if not, then we know we tried. Like we did everything that we could to try to make it happen. So about a month ago, when I went down, I remember at the beginning, it didn't seem very promising. But by the end of the week, having no leads when he went down there, by the end of the week, he had 3 interviews and 2 job offers. So by the end of the week, this whole we're moving thing became very, very real. When I was driving down there, it kind of felt like, what are the odds that this is actually going to happen? Like it just didn't feel like it was going to happen. But by the end of the week, it did. And I remember just feeling this surge of sadness in a way, like excitement, definitely, but sadness of everything that we were going to be leaving behind. So why I'm moving is another story for another time. It's not the point here, but the point here is that as soon as it became real, what I have here was not lost on me. I love this house and I love this community. So I had this idea to write a letter to the buyer. And this is the other thing. Our house got an offer in less than 48 hours from putting it on the market. It was so fast. So as I'm recording this, our house hasn't closed on the sale quite yet. But what I have been feeling is I feel connected to this buyer that I don't even know. I feel like I want them to know how much love and joy this house has brought us. It has harbored so many memories and stories. And now I don't necessarily want to spill my guts to these people, but I started last night writing a letter to these buyers, and all the stuff that came out of me was just, it was so different than when I was sitting there trying to think about the stuff that matters to me. When I started to tell another person about this home, it was very different. So I challenge you, even if you're obviously not moving, I'm assuming most of you listening to this are not getting ready for a big move, but just hypothetically, write a letter to the next homeowner of your house. And maybe this is for a future homeowner that maybe you give this letter to 20 years from now or something, and just see what comes out. And another way to do this that could broaden it, because what I realized was missing was I really wrote about the home and the immediate local area. But what if you wrote a letter to like the unit that would hold all the people who are special in your life in this area? Because I realized I am in this letter that I wrote, I've left out my experiences up here with my friends and family. And that's like a whole other stream of things that matter to me, or just events and experiences I've had around the state of Michigan in general, not so much in this local area. That is my challenge to you, my friend. Write a letter. Pay attention to how different your thought process and the things that come out of you is versus if you're just looking inside of yourself like a treasure hunt for the things that matter. I can promise you some very different things will come up when you're writing this letter. Now, uncovering what matters to you and getting clarity around what matters to you is just the first step. If you have found yourself similar at all to someone who wants to be more mindful, live with full presence, but also be mindful of the things that are happening in your life right now, to appreciate them, feel a little more content. I mean, you might be big and ambitious like me, but even ambitious people can feel contentment. I can attest to that. And just to feel a little more abundant with everything that you have in your life, not just in a physical, logical way, but emotionally abundant, I would love to invite you into the Preservation Project, where we take everything that we talked about today to the next level, because we actually start putting small, progressful actions behind these things. So if you grab the mini mag, or just go to fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast, you can find a link to the Preservation Project. I would absolutely love to have you there. And until I meet you back in your earbuds again, or in our Facebook group at intentionaldocumentary.club, Have a wonderful week. Thank you to our podcast team for making the Intentional Documentary podcast possible. Our sound editor, Lucy Burgess, Minimag designer, Jillian Adriana, and our show notes manager, Ebony Rivera. Special thank you to our episode guests for openly sharing their insight, and thank you for listening, of course. Please hit the review tab to leave a rating. I'd love to read about your favorite episodes and what has really clicked for you. And remember, the only way to approach your photography is through your lens, your way. Photograph freely, and I'll see you next time. Visit fearlessandframed.com/intentional documentary podcast for this episode and all past episodes, show notes, and mini mags.